Good evening, everybody. Do you remember when we got up to last time? Did we start Perek Beis? Shrugs. Okay. I think we did start Perek Beis, but I think it's a good place to start again from. And I want to preface the remarks by saying that Perek Beis is all about. This is the first step. The first step up the ladder, after examining, as he says, what a person's supposed to be doing in this world. What is this world all about? And I'm not going to go into that again. You can read the first chapter. We went through it in some detail. But once that's clarified to you, once it's clear to you that this world is all about getting to Olam Haba, and getting to Olam Haba is all about doing the mitzvahs properly and how dear the mitzvahs are. So what are the things that are going to help us to do the mitzvahs in such a way that we can rise up the ladder of spirituality? And nowadays, there's a lot of people nowadays want to feel spiritual. They're not so interested in being spiritual, like internet Kabbalah. It's like I want to feel spiritual. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong that you should feeling spiritual is wonderful, but feeling spiritual only makes any sense and has any reality to it if, in point of fact, you are more spiritual. Which the only way to be more spiritual is to do the mitzvahs better, because Hashem gave us these mitzvahs to be close to Him. So it's an illusion to think that you can be spiritual without doing the mitzvahs. The better you do the mitzvahs, the more Torah you learn, the better human being you become. And of course, that's what Mussar is about. And Mussar is kind of a bit daunting in a way, because you think, wow, can I really change myself? And it's changing yourself. Rabbi Yisrael Salanta said it's easier to learn all the Torah than to change one midah. But if you can't change a midah, one character trait, at least you can direct it. And that's really the most important thing to understand, that there is, to a certain extent, a person can move up. I'm not going to say how far you're going to move up. None of us are going to become Moshe Rabbeinu. None of us are going to become Avraham Avinu. None of us are going to become the Vilna Gaon. I don't know, excuse me for insulting, maybe somebody in this room will become the Vilna Gaon. But it's highly unlikely, and speaking for myself, maybe I shouldn't say that, but again, one should never limit one's ability to rise up. One should always be tremendously optimistic, because it's amazing what a person can do. But it's very, very difficult. As I said, Rabbi Yisrael Salanta said that it's easier to learn all the Torah than to change a single midah. But whatever you do, however little it is, there's no such thing as little when it comes to spirituality. And we're going to see that tonight. Every small step that you make, every step up this ladder, the Mesilas, up the path, up your own pathway, is something of inestimable value. Is an amazing thing, and it shouldn't be belittled. And the Yetzer Hara will do everything he can to tell you that what you did is insignificant, it doesn't matter, you did nothing, you're garnished, mit garnished, you're nothing and nothing. And this is the biggest enemy of a person, is to feel that what he's doing is insignificant, is more than insignificant, has no value to it. He also said, Rabbi Yisrael Salanta said that when he was a young man, he started off and decided, like most people, he was going to change the world. I think somebody once said, if a person's not a socialist when he's 18, he has no heart, and if he's still a socialist by the time he's 40, he has no brain. Everybody, when they're young, is idealistic, or they should be. And Rabbi Yisrael Salanta said when he was 18, he thought he would change the whole world. And then a few years later, he realized that changing the whole world was going to be too much. So maybe he would just change the city that he lived in. A couple of years later, he realized that was going to be impossible. And eventually, he came to the realization that if he could change himself, that would be an enormous achievement. So again, it's enormously difficult, but it's possible. And even a small change is not just small change, forgive the pun. It's a tremendous achievement, and it should be treasured and guarded. And so, given that in mind, we're now starting Perek Beis. Forgive me if we did it last week as well, but of course, like all Mussar, yeah.
I remember based on notes, we were talking about watchfulness, and that Yetzer Hara urges us not to sink. That's what we.
Okay, all right. So we're going to go over a little bit, because I'm a good territory here. Because first of all, the Mussar, the whole idea of Mussar, as he says, the Mesilas says in the introduction, you'll get nothing out of this book by reading it once. So the only way you get the only way you chip away at all the presuppositions and the concrete that we set our personalities and our aspirations in life is by constant review, constantly going over it and over and over and over and over and over. So if we do it twice, I'm sure that's not going to be a bad thing. Anyway, so the first step up this ladder after the realization of what a person is supposed to be doing in this world is what he calls watchfulness, zahirus, which is also translated as, I forget what he called it there, watchfulness probably, watchfulness, care, zahir, being careful. And as I said yesterday, we can translate with this one word. The one word is think. Mm-hmm. Think. So, I'm not going to go, I remember where we are now. And I think we got as far as Hinei Yirmiyo Haya Misonein Al Roya B'nei Doro. Because they were, have you got that, Jeremiah? Jeremiah used to mourn over his generation on this evil, that they were afflicted by this affliction, this nega is like almost like a leprosy, a spiritual leprosy, that they would hide their eyes, see no evil, hear no evil, and say no evil. Well, I'm not sure about the saying no evil, but they would hide their eyes and their ears. They wouldn't pay attention. And of course, the whole thing of this chapter is think. Think, you have to set aside time of the day. We said sometimes last time at night, it's also good to go wander off and sit down on the park bench there and sit and think about your life and think about what it is you're doing and what you want to do and where you are and where you're going, and is the way that you're going the way that you're going to get to where you want to get to. This is all after you've clarified, of course, what it is that's really important in this world. Okay, so he said, Jeremiah said, Yirmiyah said in Perek Ches, Pasuk Vav, Ein ish necham al ra'osoi, leima me'asisi, kulo shav b'rutzusim kasus shotev milchama. Nobody's having pity, so to speak, on themselves. They're just charging along like stallions in a war. I remember we were doing this last week. They just follow their rote, their habituation. Without any kind of giving time to themselves to check their actions and their ways. And it comes out because of this, they fall into evil, into destruction, spiritual destruction, without even seeing what's happened to them. We said before, he has two mashalim, two parables, like a blind man walking in the night, like somebody next to a river, he can fall off. Now, everybody's got the paragraph. This, I think, in English should probably start off the however. I don't know, not all the paragraphs are the same. Perik. This is way with Perik base. I'm sorry, I should have announced this. Perik base. Here we go. Jeremiah, and then it doesn't have the same paragraphs.
That one's a very old print.
In reality, here we are. In reality, in English, in reality, and it's in Hebrew. This is in point of fact one of the tricks of the Yetzer Hara. What he's going to say is as follows: the Yetzer Hara. How does the Yetzer Hara make it that a person doesn't think? Now, the human mind is an extremely active thing. I don't know, somebody once said you have about 60,000 thoughts a day. I don't know how they managed to count them. But we all know that our mind is constantly operating. And clearly when a person clarifies and identifies what it is he's supposed to be doing in this world, this will lead him to think. So the Yetzer Hara's trick is to make sure that a person doesn't think. How does he do that? So he's going to say, he fills a person's life with tremendous amount of things he has to take care of. So busy that he can't think about anything. He's going to see, we'll see this inside, it says that that's exactly what Paro did. Paro wanted to make sure the Jewish people were so busy as they say in Yiddish, bis Nacht auf morgen, from night to morning, or morning to night as we say in English. Just too busy to... This is actually the hallmark of all repressive regimes. From Stalinist Russia, you name it. Keep people busy. Keep them so, their noses to the grindstone. Keep people so busy they have no thought. They can't think about rebelling, let alone have time to organize. Nowadays, of course, where life has become much easier, the Yetzer Hara has now moved to different territory. Most people now have in their pockets something that I call a weapon of mass distraction. The Yetzer Hara, it's a wonderful machine for the Yetzer Hara. You're so distracted, a person has to see this, and he has to know what's going on in China, and he has to know what this quote-unquote influencer, who is this person? You have to know what everybody thinks about everything, and why they're wrong and why they're right, and it's a world that takes over a person's mind. So the Yetzer Hara always has many ways, but at the end of the day, I think I once told you that. No, I'll leave that story for another time. The Yetzer Hara wants to keep your nose to the grindstone, as they say in English. He wants to keep you very, very busy doing all kinds of stuff, some of which is necessary, a parnasa, but you have to be very careful, and that's why the whole point is think. And in order to be able to think, you have to set a time where you specifically break away. And you go into the park and you sit on a bench and you think about your life. And you think about what you're doing. And you think about what's important. And you think about where you want to get to. And you think all of these things we've talked about. This is in truth one of the tricks, the ruses of the Yetzer Hara. And his trickery, to make a person's work extremely heavy on him. On people's hearts, literally. Until they have no space in their brains, to introspect, and to look, in which way they're going. Because he knows, libam kimat kat al darchehem vaday miyad hayu maschilim linochem maasehem. That he knows that if you give a person even a slight respite, they will almost definitely examine their ways, and they will immediately start to regret what they're doing. And va'isa hacharata hacholes v'ismagebat miskaberes behem ad shihu ozvim achet legamre. And this is a beautiful thing to remember. And it'll be that this charata, this regret, will literally continue to grow, holeches miskaberes, inside them, until they will leave completely the chet, whatever that chet is, completely. A person looks at something that he shouldn't be looking at. This is a big problem nowadays, specifically because of these machines. And he has a moment's regret. That moment is so powerful. That moment of regret is so powerful. Because if a person acts on that moment and he seeks help, he reaches out, and there are many facilities nowadays to help people with this addiction, this terrible addiction. But that moment of regret is so powerful because it'll grow. It's like a little pure spark in somebody, that if he acts on it, he'll gradually, eventually conquer it, dominate it, and eradicate that negativity from himself. And as I said before, this idea of not allowing a person to think about what he's doing, to not consider it. I mean, of course, a person knows what he's doing, but not to reflect about what he's doing. What is that I'm doing, and where does that take me to? This is like the advice of Paro Harosha Shamar, so he says, Tikabed ha'avoida al ha'anashim. Make the work heavy. V'yasu ba va'al yeshu b'divrei shoker. What's the rest of this pasuk? Somebody's got the English there. Make the work heavy on them. Shemos. Make the word.
Yeah, but it's.
Intensify the men's labors Oh, he doesn't quote the rest of the pasuk. Okay. So intensify their labors. Shahaya miskaven shelo lahagia lehem revach klal levilti yitnu lev o yosimu eitza negdo. Why did he do this? Because his intention was, Paro, that they should have he shouldn't leave them any space at all to, it says a very similar thing just before, to levilti yitnu lev, so that they can pay attention whatsoever, or they should yotzimu eitza, or they should take advice, they should conspire, negdo. Ella hayo mishtadel lafriya lehem mikol hisbonenus, but he tried to interrupt and interfere with any kind of introspection, bekoach hasmodas ha'avoda habilti mufsekes, with the constancy of this constant work which is without end, which never stopped, never ever ceasing. That's the point. That's what the Yetzer Hara tries to do. He doesn't want to give any crack there to let a person think for even a split second. And that's the beauty of taking even a little time. And sometimes a person thinks, I don't have time for all this. But even a little time, you just go for a walk around the block, go away from people, sit somewhere, and you'll be surprised how this has tremendous benefits. This is exactly the advice, the scheme of the Yetzer Hara, mamash exactly al b'nei Adam, with regard to people who are concerned. Ki ish milchamahu, because he is a man of war, who umelumed ba'armimus, and he is well versed in trickery. A lot of fighting a war is to trick your opponent. It's not just brute strength. So of course the Yetzer Hara has brute strength. The Yetzer Hara is a malach. He's an angel. As we're going to see in a second, you can't beat an angel, you're only a man. How do you succeed? We'll see in a second. But he's an ish milchama, he's a man of tactics. We're going to see in a few seconds that there are chinks in his armor. He has flaws, he has ways that you can get around him. But he's an ish milchama and he's well versed in trickery. Now he says two things here, that it's impossible to escape from the Yetzer Hara without two things. Great wisdom. Great wisdom doesn't mean you have to be it means you have to be sensible, you have to have your head screwed on. And hashkafa gadola. Now the word hashkafa, lashkif, means to look forward, to look out. So here we're talking about something where he's hinting to here the big weakness of the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara is extremely powerful in the moment. The Yetzer Hara, when you're walking down the street and you're not prepared for this, and the Yetzer says, "Look over there," or "Do that," "Do this," "Do this," "Do that." In the split second, it's very difficult to muster your forces against him. But he's also extremely short-sighted. The Yetzer Hara does not have the ability to say to a person in a week's time, "I want you to go and do this Aveira in a week's time. I want you to go and eat in a Big Mac in a week's time." This is what he's talking about, chokhmah. A person has chokhmah, what does that mean? He needs to realize that come the moment he's going to be very, very pressed, he's going to be overpowered probably. And the hashkafa is to think and work out how he can avoid getting into that situation. Now there are many times in one's life where you end up in a situation which if you'd thought about it, think, beforehand, you'd have thought this is going to happen and that might happen and this might happen, and you didn't treat that seriously enough. And so you ended up in trouble. So this is what he's talking about. The Yetzer Hara is enormously powerful. The Yetzer Hara is a malach. By the way, it doesn't say anywhere that the Yetzer Tov is a malach. Malach means an angel. An angel is much more powerful than a human being. But a person has chokhmah and he has hashkafa, or he could have. The Yetzer Tov is the seichel. The Yetzer Tov is a combination of chokhmah and hashkafa, of thinking about what the danger is and figuring out how to avoid that. So, Huma Hanavi tzavech va'omer. This is what Chagai screamed out and said, Simu levavechem al darchechem. Pay attention to your ways. Shlomo Amar b'chochmoso, and Shlomo, King Solomon, said in his wisdom, Al titein sheina leinecho. Do not give sleep to your eyes. Usnuma la'afapecha, nor slumber to your eyelids. Hinotzeil ketzvi miyad. Rescue yourself, flee like a deer immediately. Uketzipo, and like a bird, miyad yakush, from the snare, from the trap. Achron Zichron L'Rocha Omru says, in the Gemara says in Sota, Kol Hasam Ar Chosov Olam Hazeh. Sorry, Kol Hasham. Anybody who evaluates his ways, what we've been talking about in this world, Zocher, he will merit V'roya V'yishua So Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He will see the salvation of Hashem. There's something here he brings in the notes, Rav Dov Segal brings in the notes, that about Rav, again, Yisrael Salanta, that it's, a person tends to think, and it's a big mistake, and it's also a tachbul of the Yetzer Hara, that he's got to change himself completely, or he's got to, the Yetzer Hara loves it when people make big kabbalas. He stands there on Yom Kippur, like a person stands there and says, I'm never going to look where I shouldn't look again. I'm never going to speak Lashon Hara again. The Yetzer Hara is breaking himself up with laughter. Like, my Rabbi once told me in his first year in Ner Yisrael, he stood there on Yom Kippur with 4 pages of kabbalot, of resolutions. The second year he had 3 pages, the third year he had 1 page, and the fourth year, and then there was none. The fact of the matter is that if a person wants anything to stick, and this is what he's going to say here, and it's the only way really to work, is to do things which are small, to do things which are, fixed, and to do things, that's really what I meant by hatmada, the hasmada. For example, let's say, benching is a mitzvah d'oraisa. If a person would undertake, let's say, on Yom Kippur, you don't have to wait till Yom Kippur, to say, every Tuesday lunchtime, I don't know, Wednesday lunchtime, whatever the better lunchtime is here in Ohr Somayach, and he's going to wash, and he's going to bench from a siddur or a bencher. So that is a very, very small thing to do. But if you do it every single week, that has an effect upon you. That draws down the effect of the Kedusha, of the Birkas Hamazon, of the fact that these are brachas which are the root is in the Torah, and everything that's attached to that Kedusha which a person has, and it starts to spread outwards in ways that you won't even realize. That this one small thing, he says, Rabbi Yisrael Salanta Haya Omer, shemasbik she'adam yikabel al atzmo afilu davar katan. It's enough that a person accepts upon himself even one thing. Let's say, a person has a tremendous problem, as people do it nowadays with, Baruch Hashem, we're in yeshiva. People who is in art in the world, in places like New York City or whatever, and working in business or whatever, and he's working with non-Jews, and he's working with ladies who are not properly dressed. He has tremendous nisyonos every day to look at things that he shouldn't be looking at. He's probably, he's in an office and he has to use the internet and things are popping up all over the place. Schrecklich, it's terrible. But if you know something, if he is makabel once upon a day, once a day, when something comes up, something pops up into his eyes, to turn away, this person is going to, he doesn't realize the effect that that's going to have in Shemayim, and on his neshama, and on his ability to grow up that ladder. One thing leads to another, as they say. The important thing is to figure out which direction is that one thing leading to. That's the whole key. It really doesn't matter how fast you go. This is a big, like Yetzer Hara in our generation is speed, right? Everything is speed. Nowadays, nobody really knows where they're going anymore, just as long as they can get there fast enough. It's not enough to have, 10 megabytes, you've got to have 100. Everything's going to be super fast. And fast in itself has become a virtue. I think this is because people are really not sure where they're supposed to be going to, but at least I can get there quicker. It's a kind of bilbul, a mix-up of the generation. But speed is an illusion and is dangerous. I think I once told you, I'll tell you again, my Rabbi was running out once with his brothers and sisters, and his grandmother shouted out, "Where are you going?" And this is all in Yiddish, of course, and they shouted back, "We're going to do a mitzvah. We're running to do a mitzvah." So she said, to a mitzvah you don't run. Whenever you find yourself running anywhere, have a good think about where you're running to. So this idea here is that I have to do everything at once, and that's not true, says Yeshivat Ohr Somayach, even if you do something small. And if you do it even something small has a tremendous effect. And I want to say that not only that is the only way that a person will ever get anywhere. Because we mentioned this last week, that when a person tries to bite off more than he can chew, he's sick. You do something small. What this means is, he says that this is the way. It's not in the book, I'm reading notes here. And the explanation of Yisrael Salanta's words is that he should have kavanah, that this is the way that he's going to rise up in these levels of fear of heaven, Yerushalayim, which means not doing things wrong, uliskois l'kirves elokim, and to merit to be close to Hashem through doing the mitzvahs aseh. And mimela zeh ma'asher mutal ala adam. This, therefore, because that's what a person is supposed to be doing. Lasos psia va'od psia lechavein ma'ala. To do one step and then another step with the idea of growing up all the time. To get to a high level. It's impossible to jump to a high level. A person has to start b'tzad katan, with a small step. The Gemara in Yuma says the person who comes to purify himself, they help him, he gets help. So one small thing that you accept upon yourself, and you do it with hatmada, with regularity and application, changes your life. Similarly with a small action, kava nechshav sha'odam oiveid al hamala hagodola. He's already kind of, so to speak, working on that higher level, because that's where he's going to get to through this small Kabbalah. And this is something which I think a person has tremendous optimism, because, as I say, a person can think, "Oh, this is not for me. I mean, we're in a generation now, do me a favor." But no, a person just does something very small, and he does it. It has this tremendous power. And the Yetzer Hara, apart from wanting to keep you busy doing things which are going to stop you from thinking, he's also going to tell you that what you're doing is nothing. Let's just finish off. Next paragraph. It's clear that even if a person supervises himself, he's very careful, he does all of these things. It's not impossible for a person to succeed unless Hashem helps him. As we said, the malach, the Yetzer Hara is a malach. Hua Yetzer Hara, he's the same, the Yetzer Hara is the same as the Hua Hamakatreg. He's the one who is down here, the Yetzer Hara, who tempts the person to do something evil, the Gemara says. And then he goes upstairs and he speaks Lashon Hara about the person. He sneaks on him to the heavenly court. Hua Malach HaMovis, and he's the one who's sent down to take the person's life for the Aveira. You can't beat the Yetzer Hara by yourself, but what you can do is you can merit to have divine assistance. And how do you do that? Because the Yetzer Hara is takif ma'od, very strong. Gemara HaKosev says in the Pasuk in Tehillim, Tzofer Rosha, the Tzaddik, Muvakesh Lehimosoi, Hashem lo ya'azvenu biyodo. Tzofer Rosha, again the same word actually, Tzofer, to look out. He's searching out. The Rosha, the Yetzer Hara, is spying out for ways to trip out the Tzaddik. Umavakesh La'amiso, he wants to kill him. And Hashem will not abandon him to his hands. However, there's a big but here. Ach im ha'odam mefakech al atzmo. if a person is prepared to do his part of the bargain, which is to supervise himself. Again, this chapter is talking about think. A person has to think, and he has to try his best as well as a result of that thinking. If a person does what he can, even a small action, as we said before, apart from that small action, building inside himself and making himself a better and a purer person all the time, that also means that he warrants, he's zocher, he deserves the help of Hashem. That is what a person, as they say, there's an expression in English, God helps those who help themselves. There's another expression, God help those who help themselves, when they put their hands in the till. Anyway, that was a joke. So God helps those who help themselves, meaning, but it's not just that. God will not help somebody who doesn't do something on his own. Because why? Because im ein ki im hu eino chos. If he doesn't have pity on himself, mi yochus olov, who should have pity on him? This is exactly the same thing as Chazal teaches in the Gemara in Brachos, Lamed Gimel, Lamed Aleph. Kol mi she'ein bo deya asur l'rachem alav. Anybody who doesn't have deya, knowledge. That doesn't mean knowledge of things. It means somebody who doesn't use his cup. Somebody who doesn't use his cup in the way we've been talking about now. Somebody who doesn't think. It's asur l'rachem alav. It's forbidden to have mercy on him. And that's exactly what it says. Hillel says in Avos, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? Now it seems a bit tough really if you think about it, like, okay, the guys, but that's be'etzem, the etzem tzuras ha'adam is a person, that's what a person has the ability to do. That's, you have been given the ability to think. And if you don't think, then as we saw before, you're worse than the animals. As we said before, an animal has an instinct, but the animal doesn't know why he's running away. He just senses danger. A person with a brain understands what the danger is. And if he is not prepared to save himself, then essentially he has lost the essential part of what makes him a human being. He's lost his tzuras ha'adam, So this is why it's very serious. And this is why that only Hashem will only have mercy and will help and will save. He'll save. He's not going to abandon a person. But that's provided you do your work. You have to do whatever you can do. And again, Yetzer Hara is a malach. He's an angel. You can't beat him single-handed. But you can beat him. You can beat him by being worthy of this help from Hashem, which means that you did your best. Okay, we'll draw a pause here. Bezrat Hashem will carry on next week with the next chapter. So if you can remind me, chapter 3, which is the explanation of the parts of zehirus, of watchfulness. In other words, thinking has to be done. It's going to explain how thinking works. There is thinking at the time you're doing something, there's thinking about something before you do it, thinking about after you've done it. We're going to analyze now how it is that we utilize this midah, this character trait of watchfulness, of zehirus, of care, of thinking, analyzing our actions in various ways, in the ways which will help us, Bezrat Hashem, to rise up our own personal ladders. Okay.